Fox just updated the 36, but now there's 2 of them. So naturally, I've got questions like, why are there 2? Which one is best? And is trail riding really that divided?
Honestly, it feels so much more plush off the top.
That fork is by far my favorite right now. It's a pretty special fork. It's incredibly smooth.
Before I explain why there's 2 new 36s, first, you really need to understand what Fox is all about.
Fox don't just make mountain bike suspension. They started in motocross. I picked up all-terrain vehicles along the way. It's like Uber driver. It's fair to say they know a few things about suspension.
So when Fox bring out a new fork, they're not just trying to sell you a new thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, that is good for business, but Fox are just absolutely obsessed with performance. They want to bring out the best, the fastest, the foxiest product ever, which is why there's now 2. And this factory is absolutely full of suspension heads. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. You've got damper engineers, strength testers, you've got moto heads and gravel geeks, and some people who are just absolutely obsessed with the color cashmere.
I love gold!
So the problem with the existing 36 is that it sits right in the middle, that do-it-all trail or mountain fork, which means it's good for short travel, all day, light trail riding, but also hardcore enduro racing. And that must drive Fox crazy, because how can it be great at both those categories?
Okay. Did I press record?
Okay, there's 2 36s now.
That's right.
Explain that.
We've got 2 36s. We have an all-new 36, and that is our 140 to 160 travel segment. We've got a new fork for the trail segment, a 120 to 140 millimeter segment, and that's a 36 SL. That replaces the 34.
So what's the real differences? Is there any differences other than the travel in the 2 36s?
Yeah, they're completely different. At a first glance, the forks look similar, but every part from the steer, the crown, the upper tubes, and the lower leg are all brand new and different.
So with the 36 SL, that's for shorter travel. You've made it lighter. Have you made it lighter because shorter travel bikes like lighter things, or is there any other benefits to doing that with the shorter travel?
Yeah, so we looked at the 120 to 140 segment, and we saw that riders were having to make a compromise. They were either choosing a lighter fork like the 34, but maybe lacking in stiffness, or they were choosing a 36 for the stiffness and all the performance of the 36, but then they were carrying around extra weight they didn't want. And so the 36L is the answer to that compromise. Honestly, it feels so much more plush off the top. Like, the suspension is so buttery. It's got that new bushing overlap, which allows it to have a lot less friction going in, and makes it super smooth for us and comfy in your hands.
That fork is by far my favorite right now. It's a pretty special fork. It's incredibly smooth, and you can run a lot of hydraulic support because the chassis has gotten a lot better.
Yeah, just compared to the last generation 36, it just feels more effortless to engage in its travel and break into the travel and then use that travel as well. Like, yeah, it just feels like it's doing what you want in a fork.
You're naturally biased, but do you think that this is worth an upgrade if someone already has last year's 36?
Yeah, definitely. We don't go to the trouble of making an all-new 36 for no reason. So
are people actually going to notice the difference?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
for sure. You know, we like to say with suspension, the best you know is the best you've ever ridden. So what you're riding may feel good and you're going, yeah, this feels great. I'm happy with my fork, and we hope that's the case. And we want folks, you know, when they try out new forks, they're gonna go, wow, I didn't even know it could be this good.
So the new 36 is a mid-travel trail fork with big bike energy, and the 36 SL is now the lightest trail fork on the market, or is it the burliest downcountry fork on the market now? I don't know. Maybe we need to ask, what actually is trail riding now?
Trail riding is probably one of the most fun types of riding.
I think that's such a broad It's anything. I would say it's anything off-road. That's gravel riding too, isn't it?
I feel like trail riding is just mountain biking. It's everything.
Not just riding up a fire road, but also having like climbing trails and like a variety of terrain, not just necessarily riding straight up and straight down. And maybe that's my cross-country rider bias.
Leaving my house specifically, I can ride to the trails. It's not getting in a vehicle, it's pedaling up to the top, and it's kind of riding whatever I feel like on the way down.
It's just cruising the trails, I guess. It can be anything. It can be pretty flat paths to some pretty good downhill, but it kind of just includes everything for me.
Not down country. I hate that word.
Not down. We know what it's not. I think it's sort of a midway point between cross country and enduro, but like maybe with just like a focus on fun.
What is trail riding?
Yeah.
I think it's mostly just hanging out with your buddies and having fun on bike.
Yeah?
It's pretty much the only way I can describe it.
So tell me a bit about the difference between the new 36 and the old 36. What's the big changes?
Yeah, so ground up redesign. We've been making the 36 for a long time, and it's a big deal to go through and change everything. So, you know, the big things we focus on, our goals were stiffer and smoother. And so one of the big changes was the bushing overlap. The bushings sit in the lower leg. They react the loads from the wheel that's coming into the frame. And so the further those are apart, the more leverage they have, the lower the friction is between the lower leg and the upper stanchions. Looking at the lower leg, we talked about the generally designed arch, but that increases torsional stiffness. We've also got some new and different features here. Spin this around a bit. We still have the bleeders, and we also have our patented lower leg bypass channels. Those help the fork air spring perform at its best. The lower leg is an air spring itself. It's not a part that we adjust, but the fork bleeders keep your fork running smooth. Sometimes they can build up internal pressures as you ride. Sometimes you go up to the top of the lift or climb a big climb, and you'll see a difference in pressure there. That helps relieve that and keep things running smooth. We have new lower profile bleeders that work better. We've got a new mudguard as well. It's not shown here, but you can see the mounts, and they now mount to the seal flanges instead of the bleeders. And so it's a little bit cleaner look, protects the seals really well, and that fork or that fender is available in a short and a long fender.
I'm not getting the bushing overlap. Show me.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Bushing overlap. I'm gonna use the lower leg first here. So the bushings sit in the lower leg.
Yeah.
And you can see the top one. It's here under the foam ring and under your dust wipers. You can't see the lower bushing, but it's pressed in here. And so the distance between those two things is what we call the bushing overlap. The more you spread them out, the more leverage they have. And we're gonna show you kind of a simple way to understand why that is important. So I'm gonna have you hold this with a narrow bushing overlap. Put your hands close together.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. And so when I push down here, it's hard to react, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so spread this hand out. That's an exaggeration, right? But that's a wider bushing overlap.
Okay, I've got more control.
Now you've got more control. And so you didn't get any stronger, but for the same amount of force,
Yeah.
right? The force at your hands is less.
Yeah.
And friction is the coefficient of friction multiplied by the force at that interface. And so you have higher forces here because
Yeah.
the fork reacts to loads. It doesn't move, right? So you just get higher forces here, you get more friction. So when you spread it out, lower forces at the bushings, lower friction.
Ah. And by friction, we mean kind of binding and actually stopping the forks from moving smoothly, right?
It doesn't stop the fork altogether, but it slows it down in a way that's not useful. So you want your tire and your wheel tracking all the little bumps in the ground. If it can't do that, then you lose traction. And that's when you feel the front sliding. So the less friction you have, the more the tire and the fork is able to be active, track the ground, and that results in traction. So the rider doesn't feel the friction directly, they just feel, wow, I can't believe I just railed through that bumpy corner and didn't lose any traction. And so that's where friction shows up a lot. The other big benefit is comfort, of course. That's the easiest way. When you're just riding straight along, you feel that your fork is able to absorb bumps better, you feel it less in your hands. Your hands are fresher at the end of a long descent. So another feature that we're really excited about and we put a lot of work into is this new compliant air spring. So the air spring sits inside of the stanchion here and it's locked in place. The shaft slides in and out. So you've got friction at two places. You got the shaft and the neg plate. This is what we call the neg plate. That's fixed to your bike, and when you're riding, the air spring is moving like this. This air piston is moving inside of the stanchion. And there's forces from turning, from braking, from compressions, and they're always trying to get the lower leg and the upper tubes misaligned. And it's trying to do the same thing here. So when it's trying to misalign these, it's driving extra friction at your air piston and extra friction at the neg plate. So what we've done is we've allowed some compliance in there. And you can see here, it doesn't need to do much, but the neg plate is able to move a little bit. And so what that actually looks like is, even if there's some slight deflection in the fork, this can still slide freely. You can imagine if it wasn't able to move, there's forces that are trying to bind it up. Same principle here at the air piston, and the loads are a little higher, it's a little bit stiffer, it may be harder to see, but you can see there's some compliance built in. And that compliance allows this piston to be dead center in the stanchion and move as smoothly as possible. And why does this matter? This matters because when you're seeing the most loads is when you're asking your bike for the most traction. You've got it stuffed into a berm, you're in a corner, you're hitting bumps, and you're loading that fork up, or you're braking hard. You can imagine everyone needs traction when they're braking hard. So what this allows is the fork to remain active even under those high load scenarios, and it's made a big difference. We tested this extensively in the lab. We tested it extensively with blind tests with riders, changing one thing at a time, not telling them, and everyone was able to identify the changes. Different riders, different terrains, and so we feel really confident that this is going to be a significant improvement.
Okay, so aside from the division in travel length, the way I see it is, if you ride enduro or if you are a heavier rider, both in weight and in riding style, then your 36 is still your fork. But if you are a lighter rider, both in weight or riding style, or you have a short travel bike and you want it to be lighter, then the 36 SL is for you. I don't think we need to overthink it here. It's just bikes, it's not that deep. But let me know down in the comments below, what do you think trail riding actually is?